Okay, good morning. Today we're looking at Unit 4.6, our notes for designing experiments. When we're designing experiments, there are four principles of strong experiments. The first principle is a comparison, meaning we need at least two treatment groups. Typically speaking, one of the treatment groups is a control. That's not always the case, though. A control group, of course, is the group that does not receive treatment with whom the results can be compared. So, for example, say you're testing the efficacy or the effectiveness of a medicine for reducing headaches. A treatment would be one group receives the medicine and another group receives a placebo. And then you're comparing how effective that is between those two groups. The second principle of strong experiment design is random assignment. So our experimental units, in this case, usually people, right, are randomly assigned to receive the treatment that they get. Now, we can use random assignment with a random number generator approach, right? Labeling all students and selecting with replacement from a generator, right? Labeling 0 through n. Or you can do an approach of a sort of a name in the hat. When we look at the AP assessment, there are times when they're going to want you to delineate or lay out those two approaches. So, again, any random assignment is required. The third principle that we're looking at is replication. So can you do the experiment again, or are you doing the experiment many times? With replication, what they're really looking for is there more than one experimental unit in each treatment group. And the greater number of experimental units you have, that's sort of ensures that when we go through this process of randomly selecting, groups are created that resemble one another more closely. And therefore, this gives us clearer comparison. So, having more experimental units gives you greater assurity that your data is accurate, because between those experimental units, there's a reduction for differences. And the last thing that we're looking at here of the four core principles is control. So control essentially just means procedures used to minimize the effects of variables. In particular, the variables other than the one being tested. So we see this as a control group, obviously, but also we see these as control variables. So this works to eliminate the effects of some of these confounding variables we've talked about earlier. And let's look at an example of what that looks like. So in this example, the independent variable, right, here is the type of lighting, this green lighting or this purple lighting. And what we're checking, the dependent, right, or response, is how many words they correctly recalled on a test, okay? And variables we look to control for are things like numbers of hours studied, age, foreign language studies, native language. So these different things that we're trying to make sure aren't the cause of the difference. And the last thing I'll just want to speak to is what we call a single blind and a double blind experiment. So a single blind is when participants do not know what treatments they are receiving, while the researchers do know, right? The act of knowing or not knowing changes how one perceives what the what the treatment is doing. It is often the case that if you believe you're taking something to make you feel better, you will feel better. We call this the placebo effect. Now, a double blind refers to when neither the participants or the researchers know who's in the control group. Double blinds are the most preferable form of research because then as well the researchers can't put their projections into reading the data.